Well, boys and girls, we're glad to have you here today, and we're going to be talking about a very special story where God told someone to do something and they told God no. Boys and girls, God tells us lots of things to do in His Word, and it's important that we do them. I hope you enjoy today's story as we talk about some really crazy things that happened. Today's lesson is called God's Messenger, and it's found out of Jonah chapters 1 through 4, and you can also find some in Hebrews 1 through 2. God had a job for Jonah, but Jonah didn't want it. "Go to Nineveh," God said, "and tell your worst enemies that I love them." "No," said Jonah. "Those are bad people doing bad things." "Exactly," said God. "They have run far away from me, but I can't stop loving them. I will give them a new start. I will forgive them." "No," said Jonah. "They don't deserve it." "I'll run away," Jonah said to himself. "Far away, so far that God won't be able to find me. Then I won't have to do what God says." "It's a good plan," he said, because as far as he knew, it was a good plan. But of course, it wasn't a good plan at all. It was a silly plan because you can't run away from God, but He will always come and find you. Jonah went ahead with his not very good plan. "One ticket to not Nineveh, please," he said, and boarded a boat sailing in the very opposite direction of Nineveh. See? There's Jonah trying to get his ticket, and there's the boat trying to get as far away as he could from Nineveh. Well, it wasn't long before a fierce wind blew, and the boat started to lurch and pitch and roll, and everyone started turning green. Jonah sat upright in his bed. You see, the first thing that went wrong with Jonah's not very good plan was that God sent a big storm after him. The sailors couldn't sail their ship properly. "We're sinking," they screamed, and started throwing everything overboard, suitcases, food, whatever they could find. But now Jonah knew that the storm was his fault. "Throw me in instead," he shouted to the sailors, "and the storm will stop." The sailors weren't sure. "It's the only way you can be saved," Jonah cried. And so 1, 2, 3... Here they are down under the ship, and here's the sailors throwing things off the boat. Splash! No sooner had Jonah hit the water than the waves grew calm, and the wind died down, and the storm stopped. Just then, when Jonah thought it was all over, when he was sure he was going to drown, God sent a big fish to rescue him. The fish swallowed Jonah whole in one big gulp. There's our big fish, and there's Jonah and a couple of jellyfish, but they didn't eat him, the big fish did. Jonah must have thought he didn't make it. It was so dark in there like a tomb. But then he smelled the rotting food and felt the slimy seaweed and knew he wasn't dead. He was in the belly of the fish. Sitting there in the darkness for 3 whole days, Jonah had plenty of time to think. Pretty soon he realized his plan was, well, a very silly plan indeed. He was sorry for running away. He prayed to God from inside the great fish and asked God to forgive him. There's Jonah, and those are the fish ribs because he's inside the fish. After 3 days, the fish spat Jonah safely out onto the sandy beach. Just then, Jonah heard something calling his name. "Go to Nineveh," God said. And this time Jonah said, yes. He went straight to Nineveh and told everyone God's wonderful message. "Even though you've run far from God, He can't stop loving you," Jonah told them. "Run to Him so He can forgive you." The people of Nineveh listened to Jonah and they started loving God. They learned to do what God said and to stop running away from Him just like Jonah. Many years later, God was going to send another messenger with the same wonderful message. Like Jonah, he would spend 3 days in utter darkness. But this messenger would be God's own Son. He would be called the Word because he himself would be God's message. God's message translated into our own language. Everything God wanted to say to the world in a person. Boys and girls, here's Jonah being spat out onto the beach by this large grouper, colorful looking fish. And that's pretty amazing. Well, boys and girls, I can imagine it would be really scary to be eaten entirely by a fish. But you know what, boys and girls, we see that God will always have his mission, what he wants to happen. And so we should always listen to God. When God says, hey, love your neighbor as yourself, well, guess who's even closer than our neighbor that we can't see right now? Well, our mommy and our daddy, our grandma, our grandpa, whoever we live with, our brother and sister, they're our even closer neighbor. And we ought to be kind to them. We should love them. And sometimes that's maybe sharing things we're not crazy about sharing, or we be patient when we really want to be in a rush. Boys and girls, I pray that we be like Jonah after he spit up on the beach, that we would do what God says, and Lord, and I pray that we would do it with joy. I pray that we'd be happy to do it, because that's what's best for us. So boys and girls, we miss you. We can't wait to see you hopefully soon, and I hope all of you take care.